Every once in a while in the playoffs, often because one of the opposing teams ended up lagging behind in the regular season, we get a second round or even sometimes first round matchup that ends up being arguably the best series of the entirety of the playoffs, even better than the conference or the finals. The conference finals or the finals, you get it. Last year, for example, we had the Bucks versus the Nets. Another standout is in 2019 when we had the Sixers versus the Raptors, which of course ended with Kawhi's insane buzzer beater. And not to disparage whatever potential conference finals or finals matchup we might see, but I think this year the best series of the playoffs is likely going to be Bucks versus Celtics. So, my main camera broke, and the backup camera that I bought for it also broke, so now I'm recording this video with an iPhone. If the video quality is not really up to par, I apologize, but I'm working with what I have on hand. Please be sure to subscribe for nearly daily NBA playoff content. I know I haven't exactly been holding up that actual end of the bargain lately, but I promise you I'm actually getting on track here, although maybe if more equipment breaks, we'll have to see. Also, drop a like. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Also, go ahead and check out my second channel where I am less than 13K away from 100K subs over there. I'm also trying to upload daily over there, doing post-game recaps, which are lower quality content than you get on this channel, but it also covers all of my bases because I can't do high quality stuff for everything that happens in the playoffs. As for why I believe this will be the best matchup of the playoffs, or at least I think it could be. Obviously, this is not a hard take. It's because I just think these are the two best teams in the conference. Now, I fully believe that a potential Warriors-Suns matchup, and really whatever the finals may end up being, is good enough. It could be better, but I really do think this will be the best series. Where both of these teams currently are is really interesting. I still feel as though not enough people take the Celtics seriously and respect them because of their past reputation. But understand this. The Celtics at the turn of the calendar year went 34-12, which is a 74% win percentage, which would put them on pace for 61 wins. If this team had started off the year on the pace that they ended up closing with, a lot more people would be afraid of this team than currently are. Now, on the Bucks side of things, they're in a more interesting place than even the Celtics. Because they are obviously defending champions, but in the regular season, this team wasn't quite the same as they were last year. Their defense fell off with Brook Lopez missing a ton of time and PJ Tucker no longer on the roster. Chris Middleton was bad most of the season, and really the only positive they have gained from last year is Grayson Allen has been a great addition for their bench unit, and Bobby Portis is now well understood to be this team's best bench player, and I personally think their fourth best player overall. But with all those negative things said, this is still a team that has Giannis, Chris Middleton, and Drew Holiday on it, and a head coach that, once he figured out what adjustments were, turned out to be a pretty damn good head coach. But, well, one of those pieces, Chris Middleton, will very likely not be a part of this series at all. The exact timetable on him is unclear, but most projections have him missing the series entirely. So as a result, I can't really bank on him impacting the series whatsoever, so no Chris Middleton, and that is a huge bullet dodge for the Celtics. But with all that said, let's talk matchups. Let's start with Boston's defense on Milwaukee. I think just like with what happened in the Brooklyn Nets series, a lot of people are going to be surprised with just how effective Boston's defense is versus a superstar caliber forward, in this case, Giannis. Now, by no means do I expect him to perform as awful as Kevin Durant did. Giannis is obviously not as jump shot reliant, which means he'll just be getting higher quality shots kind of inherently. But if he had games where he struggled to look like the modern day Shaq we know him to be, it would not be surprising at all. I said that the Celtics have one of the best defenses that I have seen in the last 5 years, and that was before the Nets series where they did what they did without their most impactful defender, in my opinion, Robert Williams, for a majority of the series. Really, the only defense I could think to compare the current Celtics to, and from the last few seasons, is the 2019 Toronto Raptors. Ironically, the team that caused Giannis to have the worst playoff performance of his superstar career. In my Celtics video, I made a longer tangent point about what I'm just going to say, but I'll just say it shorter here. The Celtics have one of the most well-rounded defenses that I have ever seen. Very rarely do you find a defense that is both great at the interior side of things and the perimeter side of things. Most defenses, even really, really good ones, are often mostly just on one side and the other side is just passable to good. The Bulls this year, with everyone healthy, were a great perimeter defense but a bad interior one. The Bucks have generally been a great interior defense and just passable on the perimeter, at least in the last few years. That's not so much the case because the scheme has changed and Drew Holiday has joined the team, but it at very least was the case before. The Jazz have been great on the interior with Rudy Gobert and awful on the perimeter, and that's been a huge story lately, but they've been historically good defenses with that arrangement. You get the picture. In the case of the Celtics, few teams can throw out a pair of bigs like Al Horford and Robert Williams, so that keeps the paint on lock. But if perhaps they're facing a team with more speed and a perimeter-oriented game, you can sub out one of those bigs for Derek White, who is a phenomenal defensive player on the perimeter. Now, versus Milwaukee specifically, the Celtics have the luxury of Al Horford being Giannis's primary defender, with Robert Williams, who is a great shot blocker and big body, waiting on the weak side to double Giannis or just straight up save the possession if Giannis gets by Horford, and that's just those two. Also having wings and guards who not only can handle you in the post for long enough for help to come if there's a switch, but also swipe at the ball if you're posting up on one of the bigs, throw doubles at him, and force him to make a decision. It's kind of insane how many options the Celtics have. I think the Celtics are the most well-equipped team in all of basketball to slow down Giannis. And what sucks about that for Milwaukee is, in an ideal world, if Giannis is having a rough go of it, you would rely on Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday. But of course, Chris Middleton is not going to be available this series, and Drew Holiday is hella inconsistent. For as many games as Drew was the reason the Bucks won in 2021, there were just as many games where he either caused them to lose or they won in spite of him. I think the Bucks will need a big series out of Drew Holiday, and that's not always easy to come by against a not great perimeter defense, but Drew will more than likely be being guarded by the fucking defensive player of the year as his primary defender. So an option that I already don't trust, having the worst possible circumstances against him. And the thing about this matchup in particular is kind of the thing that I always suggest for the Bucks is that they go with a more traditional mindset with how they utilize Giannis as a big man. But I actually think that's counterintuitive to this team. With the Celtics, literally the only hole I can think of with their defense is the fact that Al Horford is a little bit slow-footed on the perimeter, so the best thing to do would be to attack him from the perimeter. But the problem with that is attacking from the perimeter is not where Giannis is best utilized. It's, as the aforementioned thing, him being utilized more like a traditional big. So the best counter to Al Horford is the worst version of Giannis. Al is going to sag off, and Giannis is either going to try and drive inside and get by him and likely get met at the rim by Al or Robert Williams, or he's going to take some jumpers. And if Giannis is taking a lot of jump shots, you have won the matchup. Now, to have less doom and gloom in Milwaukee's direction, I will say that Giannis is much better at reacting to this type of defense and making the right plays as a result. Really, all of this is not me saying that Giannis is going to play bad in this series, but he is certainly not going to have an easy go of it. I would be shocked if it was as bad as Toronto or Miami. Giannis has kind of matured past that stage of his career. And another point in their favor is that their shooting has improved a ton from back then. If you ran a lineup with Grayson Allen, Bobby Portis, and Pat Connaughton out there with Giannis and Drew, so long as Giannis makes the right pass, those guys can make the Celtics pay for leaving them open, where like Eric Bledsoe was not doing that before. That said, if the Bucks do end up advancing, they will have faced their biggest offensive struggle in all of the playoffs in the second round. It's not going to get worse than this. As for how Milwaukee defends Boston's offense, well, I think that's where things get a lot more simple. One thing I find interesting is how Giannis defends Al Horford. Not because I think Giannis would struggle to defend Al Horford one-on-one, but rather whether or not he even guards him and whether or not Al Horford makes him pay for that. Al shot 60% from 3 on 3.8 attempts in round 1 versus the Nets, so he sure as shit made them pay in that series, but I also would not bank on something like that repeating, especially not at 60%. But for Boston's sake, if an open Horford 3 is considered a good shot that you will take on any possession, then it makes it harder for Giannis to perform his free safety type of role where he roams around the floor to bring help defense. Perhaps the solution to that is having him guard Robert Williams, but if Giannis overcommits, Robert is a phenomenal lob threat, one of the best in the game, but Giannis also made perhaps the most iconic play of his career, helping and then allowing a lob and then still recovering. I'm referring to the block on Ayton in the finals, so maybe that is actually the way to go for them. The next thing I'm curious about is who does Jrue Holiday guard, because he's really your only great perimeter defender available. I would give him a much better shot at bothering Jaylen Brown. Jaylen only has a mild size advantage on Holiday there, and he's obviously, well, at least it should be obvious, much worse than Jason Tatum. But on the other hand, it's also more important to stop Tatum than it is Brown, but Tatum has more size and length, is more capable of just shooting over Jrue Holiday. However, I would trust Jrue on Tatum over Pat Connaughton, Grayson Allen, or Bobby Portis. I also feel like Tatum is more likely to actually try and take advantage of the mismatch than Jaylen Brown is, so I'm probably going to lean towards putting Jrue Holiday on Jason Tatum, and hopefully Jaylen Brown doesn't kill you too much with whoever matches up against him. Also, as much as I love to discredit and apparently undervalue Brook Lopez, in this series in particular, I don't know that the Giannis at center lineups will actually be better defensively. A, because they don't have PJ Tucker anymore, and then B, this Celtics team in particular is really big inside, so you're probably going to want to match that size. Should I have said pause at some point there? Probably. I don't think the Giannis at center lineup will be effective when facing Boston's starting lineup, but if it is Derek White over Horford, then I could see that lineup being more effective, so it would be on Budenholzer to throw those lineups out there at the correct and appropriate times. But honestly, because Milwaukee's defensive personnel outside of Giannis and Jrue just isn't anything special, meanwhile the Celtics have 5 elite defenders and like 3 good ones after that, I would give the edge to Boston on the defensive side, and though the Bucks have the best player in the series, I feel like Tatum is less likely to be limited than Giannis is, so that kind of splits the difference a little bit. For me with this series, I honestly think the Celtics are just simply the more well-rounded team between the two and the more talented team between the two. However, the Bucks have Giannis, and that's terrifying in any context. So I'm going to go, in terms of my prediction, just the typical cop-out. It really could go any way, but forced to make a prediction, I am going to go Celtics in 6 or 7. Either way, it'd be close. Also, I've been thinking about this recently. Like, the actual game pick doesn't matter, because you can have a 4-game series that's technically close, like the Nets Celtics matchup that we just saw. Either way, if it's a 5-game series, it'll be close. If it's a 6 or a 7, it'll be close. Anyways, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.